Neon lights twisted into a blurred light in the rain in the night capital. Chen Yan curled up in the wind pipelines of Gauching Enterprise building, and the quantum guest device in his backpack was buzzing lightly. He is 25 years old, with a thin body and a metal wall, staring at the holographic projection program interface. This city has never really belonged to people. Giant enterprises are like obscure giants, controlling every chip and breathing. This was his first major operation, an invasion of the Quantum Alliance with the goal of digging out the trauma they manipulate brain implants. With his fingers dancing on the virtual keyboard, Chen Yan cracked the first layer of the firewall. The program flowed like a river, and his heartbeat accelerated. He was also their experience. A failed brain interface test 10 years ago made him lose some of his memory and change to this unusual talent for tourists. The flame of revenge was always burning in his chest, but was always suppressed by the shadow of morality. Is he just copying the atrocities of those corporates? The alarm suddenly flashed, and a red light swept across the pipe, and the sound of the system's artificial intelligence came to a cold voice. Invasion test, level 3 threats. He cursed and switched to the rear door passage. The digital tracking network spread like a spider network, blocking his exit. At the same time, an encrypted communication window pops up. His streetman, Ella, a woman who works in the black market chip trading. She always goes straight. Chen Yan, are you playing with fire again? Remember that experience? They turned you into a monster. Do you want to self-destruct now? Her voice roared in the headphones, carrying the thick twitches on the street. Chen Yan gritted his teeth and replied, "Monster? At least I am still resisting. The information can prove that they control the artificial intelligence of the entire city, Ella. It's not for me, but for everyone." His words were filled with rebellious arrogance, and there was a hidden inner movement. The revengeful impulse made his fingers tremble, and he almost found a self-destructive program. He glanced at the projected police image. They were approaching the server room, and the fresh crisis was like current rushing across the spine. Ella responded quickly, "Well, traitor boy, don't forget that I owe you a penny. But if you are caught, I won't come to save you." The communication was cut off, leaving a silence. Chen Yan took a deep breath of damp air, turned off some sensors, and avoided chasing. He must continue. This is not only for himself, but also for those souls slammed under the neon light. As the pipe leads to the main server, it slides into the dark machine room, and the air is filled with the burnt smell of electric wires. The program code is cracked to the key point and the database door is opened slowly. The warning gradually weakened, but he knew that it was just a temporary calm. In the shadow of Yedu, more challenges are waiting. Chen Yan slid out from the dark corner of the main server room, and the quantum guest device in his backpack emitted an ominous low bird to remind him that he was in a tight time. The air was filled with the burnt smell of metal and electric wires, and he glanced at the red warning lights in the corridor outside the door. The Enterprise security team has adjusted the unmanned aircraft group, spinning outside the building like an aerial hunter, and the artificial intelligence monitoring network is like an invisible Roman network, blocking the surrounding streets. Chen Yan was breathing rapidly, and he had to escape before they locked his position. He rushed towards the narrow outlet, and the soles of the shoe slid sparks on the smooth floor. The device's battery alarm lights up, and the heat comes through his backpack, causing his shoulder to sting. This is a minor trouble. If it is too hot, the device may be used to destroy the data he has worked hard to obtain. He quickly glanced at the small display on his wrist, his fingers flying in emergency mode, trying to adjust the heat dissipation system. In the memory of the experiment room that was 10 years ago, those cold doctors had implanted similar components in his brain, which has become his burden now. The sound of the unmanned engine approached from above, and Chen Yan turned into a side door, falling into the foggy back alley. The tunnel is narrow, and the high-profile abandoned buildings on both sides cast deep shadows, and the rainwater transforms into a stale and mellow flow on the ground. Here is the edge of Yedu, filled with corrupt neon signs and hidden monitors, and he must be careful of every step. While he gasped, he activated the invisible communication device and Ella's voice immediately came, carrying her all over the street. "Boy, are you still alive? I heard that the business network has spread to this area." They caught an old friend of mine because of the death experience. I was stuffed into the chips in their brains, pretending to be upgrades, and it turned out to be their puppet. Her words were filled with anger and ridiculed, revealing her fragility, which made Chen Yan realize that she was not just a lineman, but someone who was also injured by the system. Chen Yan leaned against the wall and responded quickly, "I won't repeat your cover, Ella. This device is almost damaged, but the data is the key." His lingering spirit was hidden inside movement. He adjusted the heat dissipation pads of his backpack and felt the heat was slightly calmer, while avoiding a low-flying unmanned aircraft. Ella's warning made him feel alert. "The network is gone, don't rely on luck alone. Let's work together, we owe them a pen." Her words were like a catalyst, igniting Chen Yan's determination. He closed the communication, walked along the lane, used the mist to cover his body, traversed the sensor of artificial intelligence, and finally entered a wider street. The hustle and bustle of the streets surrounded him, and pedestrians shuttled like ghosts. Chen Yan calmed his feet and fixed the device. Although he was rushing to chase after him, he knew that the sarcastic wire extended like a spider, pointing to a deeper corrupt core. "Keep going, this city is still waiting for changes." Chen Yan meandered along the street covered by the fog, stepping on the slippery rock, making a low echo. The noise around the city gradually faded away. He pushed open a wire door hidden under the neon arch and stepped into the underground bar. The air inside is mixed with the smell of synthetic alcohol and motor oil, and the dim lights fall from the metal columns of the lens, and the screen flashes behind the bar to real-time street monitoring images. This place is the underground trunk of Yedu, where a group of soldiers and tourists wearing light-eyed lenses flow. The confusing electronic music rhythm makes people warn of the potential danger. He looked around and quickly locked Ella. She leaned against the corner space, the worn-out clenched ridge reflected blue light, and the scar on her face seemed to be a proof of past pain. Chen Yan pulled the chair and sat down, put his backpack on the table. "The data is here," he said, with low voice pressure on his face, "but the device is burning, I have to be quick." His fingers slammed his backpack, trying to ignore the burning sensation from his shoulders, which was a secondary threat, enough to make the transaction tricky. Ella raised her eyes and reached out to take the device. She laughed at her words. "You guy is always playing with fire," she said, her words slim in the streets. "I was once stuffed into my brain that was dead chip, thinking it was an opportunity, but it turned out to be their plaything. Every day my brain was short-circuited like a circuit, and I couldn't control myself." She paused for a moment, her eyes flashed over a fragile, which was a very rarely exposed aspect, which made Chen Yan realize that they were not only partners, but also survivors of shared infirmity. At this moment, a sudden sensation broke the silence. A corporate gang member who disguised himself as a wine drinker rushed towards them, holding an electromagnetic suppressor in his hand. The atmosphere in the bar suddenly became tight, and other customers quickly scattered to avoid possible conflicts. Chen Yan reacted quickly, grabbed the device and pushed Ella out. "They are catching up." He growled, and at the same time he felt the heat of the backpack increase, and the device's alarm was shaking in his palm. He used his body to hold the attack from the gang, kneeling to the other party's abdomen, and took advantage of the situation to return to his command. Ella was not willing to be outdone, so she pulled out a small electric stick from her waist and swung toward Jiwan's weapon. "Don't be stupid, you can live with cooperation," she shouted, with anger in her calmness. In the chaos, Chen Yan quickly exchanged the information. The street map provided by Ella and the weaknesses within the company were enough to allow him to crack the firewall next. Before the device is about to get over the hot machine, he turned off the power and uploaded the data to the temporary encryption link. The transaction ended, the parties were dragged away by other customers, and the bar gradually returned to a steady state. Chen Yan stood up and patted Ella on the shoulder. "That's just beginning," he said, his voice calm. They left together, blended into the fog in the outside, and moved towards the next goal. The lights on the street extended in front of your eyes, and the shadows of the city seemed to fade away slightly. They were walking along the foggy alleys, and the noise of the night capital was gradually nowhere to go. Chen Yan pushed open a door that was disguised as a waste warehouse and walked into the interior. Here is a damp basement, with the air filled with the smell of fermented metal and faint light. The wires hanging from the ceiling are moving like blood vessels, and the flashes are filled with unstable light. This secret point is Ella's hiding place, filled with modified electronic equipment and blurred projection screens, symbolizing her cunning mantra of living on the street. Chen Yan opened his backpack and projected the street map provided by Ella onto the wall. The map marked the weaknesses of the company. He slides his finger over the screen, quickly enters the code, and tries to crack the core firewall. "This firewall is like a living thing," he said, with an insane rebellion in his language. "Every time I try to enter, it will strike." His voice fell, and the system alarm rose, and a wave of digital counters swept over his device, virtually attacking the intruders to track his position. Ella leaned against the wall, monitoring the surroundings. She pulled out a cool spray from her waistband and sent it to Chen Yan. "Don't let that thing burn," she said, her voice sturdy and direct. "The time I was implanted into the chip almost melted my brain. Those companies thought they could control everything, but they only made me hide more." This exposes her past shadow, allowing Chen Yan to glance at her fragile side. He responded with a tip, and recalled his escape, the burning scars left on his arm when he escaped from the laboratory that year still hurt. The device started to get overheating. Chen Yan was distracted, and was busy with the spray cooling agent. "It's damn, artificial intelligence is so agile," he murmured, sweat slid from his magnitude. He forced himself to focus on it, cross a layer of defense, and finally got a few hidden files, certificates about corporate sacrificiality, including illegal monitoring plans. But at this moment, the warning tips rose up, and the virtual tracker locked their positions, vibrating the air. "We have to go," Ella shouted, pulling Chen Yan's arm up. He quickly turned off the device and moved the file to the encrypted register. They thrust out of the basement, blended into the smoke outside, their heartbeats synchronized with the movements of the city, and moved towards the next safety point. The lights on the street flashed in front of you, bringing a constant sense of urgency. They ran along the street covered by the shady squid, and the huge figures on the elevated bridge overlooked the edge of the night capital like a giant beast. Chen Yan pulled Ella's arm and turned into a rocky bridge. This was once the old traffic jungle. Now only the broken steel and flash projection remains, and the smell of oil and electric wires burnt in the air. They gasped and leaned against the slippery wall, trying to throw off the tracker, but as soon as they stepped into this hidden corner, a low buzzing bird began, and the Enterprise's artificial intelligence guardrail system started. The system's projection image appears like a ghost, and the red light swept across the surroundings, automatically locking the invader. "See the ghost, this thing is more flexible than I thought," Chen Yan said in a low voice. He quickly pulled out the tail end from his backpack, danced his fingers on the keyboard, and tried to picture it into the core program. "It's responding to every step of my life." The defense system launched the first attack, and an electric arc shot from the ceiling, forcing them to avoid it. Chen Yan's movements were agile and felt that the digital trap was erected at the virtual level, attempting to block his invasion path. At the same time, Ella's eyes began to dissipate, and her palms pressed on the sun's hole. "The chip that's dead is causing trouble again," she murmured, her voice trembling. The interference radiated out of the system and touched the implants in her body, which seemed like a tide, allowing her to see the twisted shadows squirming on the wall. She shook her body and tried to calm down, but this interference made her move and was hit by another arc. I see those ghost things in the laboratory," she gasped. "Don't worry about me, get this wasteland first." Chen Yan glanced at her and knew that this was her post-mortem, that she had been manipulated by the company in the past. He stressed the impulse that he wanted to stop and focused on the program. "I remember the burn on my arms ate like fire when I escaped from the laboratory," he said quickly, his revenge was tangled in his air. "Those guys thought they could erase everything, but I just wanted to destroy them." This sentence made Ella slightly lighter, bit her teeth, snatched the impact of her vision, pull out the stick from her waist, and protect Chen Yan's side wings. Finally, Chen Yan passed the last layer of defense and cut off the tracking mechanism. "Done," he shouted, the system's projection gradually dissipated. But the police have not completely calmed down, and they know there is not much time left. Ella wiped off her sweat. We have to go to the underground black market, where there are equipment that can block these things. They quickly exchanged their eyes, and trust deepened in the crisis, and jointly decided on the plan: first pass the hurdle under the bridge, and then sneak into the black market to seek allies. They stood up and walked along the dark passage, heartbeats blending with the rhythm of the city, ready to face the next challenge. They advanced along the wet underground tunnel, rumbling in the narrow passage. The black market in Yedo is like a hidden movement, hidden from the city, full of flashing neon lights and pungent chemical smell. Chen Yan was heading, the end machine in his backpack was slightly hot. He glanced at Ella, as she was urinating with restlessness in her body. The passage wall was filled with glowing vine cables, and sparks occasionally illuminated the road ahead of them. Suddenly, a mute came from the front. Chen Yan grabbed Ella's arm and pulled her into a side alley. Deep in the black market, a group of members of the assisted mask gathered next to a temporary seat. Their leader, a burly man with a flash-filled quantum tattoo embedded in his shoulder, is dealing with a mysterious buyer. Chen Yan recognized the tattoo's image, the corporate tag. This guy is a party, they have to walk on the road. Don't make a sound, Chen Yan said lightly, with a habitual picking in his temperament. These guys get crazy when they hear the smell of money. Ella clicked, but her visual line began to blur. The implant's interference came again, and illusion was rippling like a ripple. She saw the surrounding cable twisted into a living creature, squirming in the air. Don't die, she murmured, leaning against the wall to breathe. Chen Yan stopped his pace and quickly slid the environment. He knew her symptoms were caused by those forced experiments, and the past was invasive like a virus. This is a gift left by those bastards, right? He said, trying to joke and tightly. I remember the first time I escaped, my brain seemed to be struck by a wire. This made Ella smile slightly, and she held the stick tightly, forcing herself to stand up. I won't drag you down, she responded, her voice trembling with a little bit. Stay. They quietly crossed the position and entered a more obscure trading area. This is filled with flashing prohibited equipment, and the air is filled with a mixture of metal and spices. Chen Yan knelt down and connected his final to a shield. This thing can hold them to track, he said, his fingers jumping on the screen, but fast. These helping bosses don't like uninvited guests. Just as he cracked the security password, Ella's vision continued, and she saw the shadow of her leader approaching them. She pushed Chen Yan suddenly. Someone is here. But that was an illusion. Chen Yan cursed a sound, adjusted the program, and successfully overwhelmed the wall. After obtaining the equipment, they quickly put away their things. Chen Yan felt Ella's trust as a steady light. Let's go down together, he said, no longer an order, but a promise. She pointed her head, and there was a layer of determination in her eyes. They turned away from the trading area, blended into the hustle and bustle of the black market, and headed towards the next hiding place. The rest of the street lights faded behind them, and the city's movement continued to push them forward. They slipped out of the trading area, blended into the chaotic crowd of black markets, and rushed through the long alleys in a hurry. The air is filled with rotten metal smell and confusing mechanical buzz, making people unable to breathe. Chen Yan led Ella into a darker channel. The walls here were covered with flashing quantum screens, showing real-time street transaction data, and occasionally flashing a snowflake image of interference. This is the deep impurity of the other side of the black market, a dense belt filled with electromagnetic vortexes, allowing them to keep the gaze of their followers at a time. But Ella's condition quickly became obsolete. She suddenly stopped, pressed the sun's hole with both hands, and the eyes blurred into a whirlpool. Those images are coming again, she murmured, her voice stumbled like a broken circuit. The vision unfolded before her, the scene of the corporate experiment room, the cold surgical syrup and forced implanted memory, flooding like toxins. She saw herself being struck on the device and screamed in the ruthless metal room. This loss of control not only made her body tremble, but could also cause loud screams to expose their positions. Chen Yan glanced at the fear in her eyes and immediately grabbed her arm. Hey, don't let those ghosts swallow you, he said, with a habitual playful edge that couldn't hide a rush. We have to move on, these helping eye lines may keep up at any time. They continued to move forward and ran towards the next hiding place, an encrypted underground door hidden in the end of this electromagnetic interference area. Chen Yan took out the terminal machine and tried to crack the door lock, but the device suddenly flashed and a series of codes appeared on the screen. The electromagnetic vortex in the black market is interfering with the signal, making his tools useless. This obstacle made him spellbound. He quickly checked his backpack and found that the problem was from the surrounding energy field. "Damn it, this thing has been fucked," he murmured, his fingers quickly tapping on the keyboard, trying to recalibrate the picture. At the same time, Ella's fantasy drama, she grabbed his clothes. "I see them, those businessmen are nearby." Despite the illusion, Chen Yan knew that it could not be ignored. He recalled the scene when he fled from his business. That night, he was imprisoned by high pressure, and the implanted device almost made him terrorize and forced him to choose revenge or collapse. "I understand that feeling," he said. His voice was so low that it was really heartfelt. "When I escaped, I thought I would be torn apart by those memories. But we are not victims, we are the dreams of those bastards." This was not empty comfort, but a clip of his inner relief and slaughter, helping Ella calm down his emotions. She took a deep breath, held the stick tightly, her eyes gradually calmed down. "Yes, we won't be controlled by them anymore," she responded, with a hot heart in her speech. Finally, Chen Yan repaired the terminal machine and the door opened with a click. They rushed into their hiding place, a temporary basement filled with scrapped servers and blurred projection light and shadow. Ella's vision gradually receded, and they quickly checked the surrounding area to ensure safety. After reorganizing, they continued to move towards the city, and the city's movements pushed them behind them, and the flames of revenge became stronger and stronger. They crawled out of the pile of dark servers hidden underground, and the edge of Yedu was like a large electronic net cover. The high-profile quantum barrier is surrounded by blue-purple light, separating the surrounding ruins from the sea of neon lights. This is the fortress of the Enterprise, with pungent electric odor in the air, making people feel hidden energy. Chen Yan led Ella and advanced along a narrow metal walkway, avoiding the scattered sensors on the ground at each step. These devices vibrate slightly like living creatures, monitoring any invasion. Ella's breathing became rapid, and she held the stick tightly in her hands, trying to suppress the storm in her heart. "These lights, they are twisting," she murmured, her eyes obscured by a blurred vision. This as her vision re-emerged. The memory implanted by the company invaded like a virus, forcing her to see the illusion police force lined up in front. Chen Yan glanced at her and noticed the danger. He recalled his slaughter in prison that year. At that time, he relied on a piece of energy and direct vision to the system to break the way out from a high-pressure cell, and the fear at that time made him vow never to be a pawn again. This reminiscence was not about self-impression, but to motivate him to hold Ella's hand. "I heard these illusions were just their hands," he said, speaking with a habitual slight picking. "Remember when I escaped from prison? It's not about the air, but about letting the machines bit their tails. We're going to do the same thing now." His words injected into Ella's will like electricity, and she slapped her head, flashing a flash in her eyes, calming her emotions at a moment. But obstacles are added immediately. An artificial intelligence trap system is activated, and the quantum barrier turns into a light network, automatically sliding out of the hidden wall. These robotic humans are flashing red scan light, and the action is as fast as flash. Chen Yan quickly took out his final machine, danced on the virtual keyboard with his fingers, and tried to crack the first level of defense. However, Ella's vision made her misjudge a sensor, and she accidentally touched the alarm, and the guard's laser beam immediately swept across the aisle. Chen Yan cursed a sound and pushed Ella to hide in a sunken wall. "Things that should be dead are too sensitive, don't be irritated," he shouted, while injecting codes to short-circuit the barrier at a while. Ella gritted her teeth and replied, "I can't control it, but I won't drag you down." Her voice was calm, and there was a fragility hidden, reminding her that she had been a victim of her experience. During the battle, Chen Yan found a breakthrough. He used the terminal to release a reincarnation interference, forcing the guards to fall into a circle of self-criticism. Taking advantage of the opportunity, they rushed over the internet and arrived at hidden data points. Ella's vision retreated, and she helped extract a crypto file, a thread about corporate corruption transactions. This takes their revenge plan a step further. They gasped and continued to move forward. The city's low and deep thorns reverberated from behind, like an endless engine, striving for the next challenge. After they slid over the light network, they penetrated a hidden database of data, hidden in the underground layer deep in the ruins, and the air was filled with the sour smell of metal rot. In the warehouse, countless luminous panels are like rows of eyes watching at night, flashing against green data flowing, turning the dark space into a living digital creator. Chen Yan took Ella's hand and quickly swept around. This was their temporary shelter, and it was also full of potential traps. He connected the terminal to the central section, and the encrypted file extracted from the quantum barrier popped out from the screen, and a red warning symbol flashed, warning the built-in artificial intelligence guardrail program. "The file has turned on defense," Chen Yan said, his voice with a kind of tactful silence. "This thing is like a slapped wolf, ready to bite us at any time." He quickly tapped his fingers on the virtual interface and tried to picture the first layer of encryption. Ella knelt beside him, staring at the screen, and began to blink. Her vision came again, and this time a group of vague corporate communities appeared, approaching from the shadows, wandering like a ghost in the corner of the warehouse. She slammed her head and tried hard to focus. "Those guys, they were monitoring us," she said softly, her voice trembling slightly, without losing her stubbornness. The artificial intelligence guardrail counterattacked, and a virtual virus poured into Chen Yan's end machine like a tide. The screen twisted into a whirlpool, and the system alarmed the inverse count. "Only 3 minutes, otherwise the file will self-sell." Chen Yan cursed a spell and switched to the backdoor program. He glanced at Ella. "Don't let those illusions cheat you, Ella. Remember? When I escaped from the room, my brain was filled with their garbage programs, forcing me to see the wall that did not exist. But I still drew it, relying on a wave of life and disobedience." His words were straightforward and thorny, like a sobering agent, revealing the incision of his imprisonment by the company that year. That escape was not only aura, but also a deep hatred for the system. This sharing made Ella's eyes lit up. She took a deep breath, shook the phantom interference, and reached out to help monitor the virus invasion point. In a mess, the virus test map locked their connections, and the panels in the warehouse began to flash and emitted a low buzzing sound. Ella's fantasy drama, she saw a virtual fantasy scene stretching out her hand, but she gritted her teeth and ignored it, turning to point out a weakness on the screen. "Here, this point is not aligned, cut it quickly." Her instructions were accurate, helping Chen Yan find a breakthrough. He injected a string of countercodes, forcing the AI guardian into a circle, and the timer stopped at the last moment. The file is decrypted, revealing the high-level corporate manipulation of artificial intelligence to monitor citizens' daily life, illegally adjusting population data to maintain power. This not only proves their revenge line, but also reveals a bigger clue. They turned off the terminal and the air in the warehouse seemed a little calm. Chen Yan patted Ella on the shoulder. "Let's go, there's more to wait for us." She pointed, and the two quietly left, heading towards the depths of the city, and their feet were rumbling in the passage, as if the movement of the story never stopped. They emerged from the ruins passage and penetrated into the dark tunnel at the lower level of the city, where there was another face hole in Yadu, filled with damp fog and confusing mechanical roar. Chen Yan led Ella through an entrance that was disguised as a broken winding entrance, and entered the underground assistance site, a nest converted from a waste factory. The wall was filled with flashing holographic projections, like living electronic vines, projecting a virtual alert system for assisting the members. The air is filled with a mixture of oil and spices. "This is the magazine that helps the old lair," reminding the survival method here. "Trust is a scarce stock." Helping Pat's leader, Carlo, a burly man, leaned against the bar, his eyes swept over them. He was once a former company preservation company and now leads this group of storm teams, always being wary of outsiders. "You two are not small," Carlo said, his voice as thick as a metal scraper. "With that pile of data coming in, can't you think we are your private backyard?" Chen Yan looked at him directly, took out the copy of the encrypted file, and projected it into the air. "This is not empty talk," he said, with habitual challenges. "Enterprises are manipulating artificial intelligence to monitor everyone, adjusting population data to stabilize power. We have evidence that their fortress collapses. But we need alliances, not just fight alone." Ella stood aside, her hands tightly clamped, her heartbeat accelerated, and the vision began to invade again. Those virtual shadows swayed around her vision, looking like weapons that helped the members of the mission. She slammed ahead and tried to suppress the picture, but when a member moved inadvertently, she mistakenly thought it was an attack and pushed Chen Yan hard. "Be careful, they're in the circumference," she shouted, her voice scattering a panic-like edge. The war broke out, and the members of the helping faction responded quickly. Someone pulled out the electric stick, and the rushing fists and feet fists were swept in the narrow space. Chen Yan cursed and grabbed Ella's wrist. "Die, Ella, concentrate. This is not your illusion playing with the game." His words were like a warning bell, reminding her of the injustice of the experiment that year, and also exposed his own weakness, that year of imprisonment by the Enterprise, which allowed him to learn to find a way out in the chaos. Carlo stopped his subordinates and stared at Chen Yan with a sharp look. "What kind of trick is this? If your people are so unstable, how can we believe it?" Chen Yan took a deep breath, extinguished his anger, and shared more details. "I understand your suspicion. I was once involved in their laboratory, like a test piece, with strong procedures in my brain, forcing me to see a trap that does not exist. But I escaped, not by luck, but because I knew what a real enemy was." This sentence made Ella's eyes look like this. Softening, she murmured lightly, "We've all experienced the gang, aren't we?" This interaction calmed down in the atmosphere, and Carlo was calm. "Okay, let's talk. But remember, I'll kick you out with a squirt of a squirt." After a short-term partnership, they initially formed an alliance to provide support for virtual invasion and exchange Chen Yan's information. When they were ready to leave, Carlo patted Chen Yan on the shoulder. "Don't let the betrayed spirit follow you." The two walked into the tunnel, their steps blended into the city's movement, and moved towards the next goal. Chen Yan and Ella went along the tunnel deep, and the virtual invasion device in their hands flashed with cold blue light. It was Carlo's latest equipment, a quantum pin that could surf the firewall. At the corner of the tunnel, they stopped and leaned against a rock-bearing support column. Chen Yan quickly connected the device and inserted a light wire into his neural implant, feeling a current flowing through the brain. "Are you ready, Ella? This time I'm not a street player." His voice was filled with a habitual quick pick, as if he was challenging his fate itself. Virtual space flows like a tide, and their consciousness is pulled into the stream of communication. This is the fortress of the core artificial intelligence of the Enterprise, a sea of digital fogs floating with flashing code fragments and transformed humanoid guards. The environment is full of sensibility, and every pixel can turn into a trap. Chen Yan swept around him, his movements were as quick as electric light. "Don't be stunned, Ella. We have to find the main point and extract those population data," he said. His language is determined, and there is a deep evil of artificial intelligence. This is from his young shadow, the years he was banned by the company, which allowed him to survive in the palace of virtual mystery. But artificial intelligence quickly countered. Digital illusions appear like ghosts, distorting their perceptions. Rows of metal skulls appeared in front of Ella, with blurred figures inside, screaming in the virtual replies. She gasped, her hands trembling. "No, what are these? They are chasing us." Her words continued, hallucinations were added, and the real defense program was mixed with her inner fear. Operational mishaps followed, and she accidentally touched a warning wall and found more virtual traps, making the data flow messy. Chen Yan grabbed her virtual incarnation and pulled her into a hidden memory module. This is the weakness of artificial intelligence defense, a simulated memory corridor. "Speak, Ella, I understand this feeling," he said. His voice was low and warm, sharing his past. "I was locked in their cell, my brain was filled with strong illusions, and I thought I was a monster every day. It was not the energy, but the hatred that made me swept over. This sentence injected into her consciousness like electricity. Ella's eyes were gradually focused. She took a deep breath and silenced. We can all fight it, right? She responded, her language turned to a slightest, and her hands firmly grasped the control interface. With this new courage, they worked together to break the wall. Chen Yan's skills resolved the psychological attack of artificial intelligence, and Ella corrected the error at the critical moment. They successfully extracted the certificate files, a batch of raw data about population manipulation. The virtual space gradually disintegrates, their consciousness returns to reality, and the devices in the tunnel produce low birds. Walking out of the tunnel, they leaned against the wall and gasped, holding the newly obtained data in their hands. Chen Yan glanced at Ella and pointed at the head. "This is just the beginning, we have to contact other alliances." His words merged into the surrounding mechanical buzz, and the two continued to move forward, integrating into the uneven undercurrent of Yedu. Chen Yan and Ayla were walking along the streets of Yedu, holding the newly extracted data chip in their hands, reflecting the red-purple light of the surrounding high-profile buildings. They avoided the main road and chose narrow side lanes. The projection advertisements in the lanes flashed like phantoms, promoting fake urban paradise. Chen Yan's sensory implant vibrated slightly, warning the nearby monitoring station. "Go ahead," he said softly, with a habitual urgency in his language. "The scan network of enterprises is getting tight. We need to find the nest of the brain before they lock their positions." Ella clicked and suddenly stopped. Her vision is blurred, an illusion is revealed, the streets are twisted into a group of metal nets, and the figures turn into vague phantoms of pursuers. She slammed her head and tried to suppress the symptoms. "Wait, I see something," she gasped, her voice trembling slightly, like a soldier, coming from there. This was her vision again, the post-mortem left in her street drug experiments, which made her feel difficult to tell her apart. Chen Yan glanced at her and quickly pulled her into a hidden passage. "Take a deep breath and don't let it control you," he said, speaking with a slight concern. "I've been escaping these ghost things for a few years. Come with me." They moved into a deserted business site, which was the remains of the slaying when the night was expanded early, a rock-clad tower with cracked wires and flashing screens inside. The air is filled with the smell of metal burnt, which was once a test site for enterprises. Chen Yan leaned against a slanted wall and quickly scanned the wafer data. "The encryption layer here is thicker than expected," he murmured, his fingers plodding on the virtual interface. "We need a minute to breathe." Ella leaned against him, her eyes lit up. She turned around and asked, "Why are you always so cold? In this place?" Chen Yan paused for a moment, his eyes turning to the darkness far away. "Because I've seen something worse," he responded, his voice turning low. "When they were young, they kept me in prisons like this. It was not a simple ban, but a false memory that made me think I was their weapon. Every day when I wake up, I have to fight to remember who I am." This sentence was like a hidden current, revealing the scars in his heart, and letting Ella feel the deep burned determination. She clenched her fists and said, "I understand, my vision is the gift of that kind of experiment. But we can't just stop there, right?" Taking advantage of this moment, they adjust the route. Chen Yan cracked some encryption and locked the possible hiding place of his head and brain, a high-level complex building. Suddenly, there was an engine sound coming from outside, and the armed pursuers approached. Ella's symptoms relapsed, and she misread the map, causing them to be exposed. Chen Yan reacted quickly, pulled her out from the back door and climbed up the stairs. "Don't be anxious next time," he said, joking with a silly voice, "we have more ghost things." They continued to move forward, blending into the shadow of Yedu, approaching towards their target. The voice of the pursuers behind gradually faded away, and the two accelerated tacitly, ready to face the next challenge. Chen Yan took Ayla's hand and emerged from the dark alleyway, stomping on the damp road. They finally came to the edge of the high-level complex building, a giant steel-reinforced concrete standing in the core of the night capital, surrounded by a blue-green energy barrier, flashing like breathing movements. The air is filled with the pungent smell of ozone. This is the Fortress of Enterprises. It is an ostensible place to be decorated into a high-tech office area, but actually a nest of a layer trap. Chen Yan looked around and felt the implant coming from a faint buzz, reminding him that he might be alert at every step. Ella's breathing became rapid, and her fingers couldn't help but hold Chen Yan's arm tightly. "Wait, that road," she murmured, staring at a narrow path ahead. "Something is moving, like a group of mechanical beasts patrolling." Her vision developed again, and the postmortem left by street medicines actually twisted into a group of chaotic images. Chen Yan knew that he could not take care of her, so he pulled her into the repair passage beside him. The walls here were covered with flashing cables, moving like living things. In order to avoid her misguided direction, they were forced to walk through a row of automatic cannon towers. These devices are quietly hanging on the ceiling, reddishly scanning the air, and any anomalies will trigger a ruthless backlash. In this difficult roundabout way, Chen Yan glanced at Ella with a flash of fear. He said lightly, "Don't let those illusions walk around the nose. Remember, we are not running for life, but moving forward." His words carried the consequences of habit, and there was a gentleness hidden, which was learned from the darkness of the past. Ella took a deep breath and replied, "I tried to control it, but sometimes I felt like I was trapped in my brain." They continued to move forward and finally dived into a hidden monitoring room, a blind spot on the floor, full of flashing screens and cracked sensors, and the air was as refreshing as a catacomb. Chen Yan leaned against the wall and quickly looked at the chip in his hand, and the data flow rolled in the virtual interface. He turned to Ella, his eyes softened a little. "I was kept in a prison like this when I was young," he said, his voice low and direct. "Not an ordinary prisoner. They manipulate my senses with implants, making me think I am their tool. Every night, I have to dig out a real memory, like picking up broken glass. At that time, I thought that was just the way to go until I learned to fight it." This dissection made Ella's eyes light up, and she clenched her fist to suppress the illusion that was about to explode. "You always crawl out of the deep in purgatory," she said. "I have to learn you for our business." During the discussion, Chen Yan hesitated for a moment. He knew that invading the nest would require the dangerous and enhancing implant device to crack the highest level of encryption, but it would also sniff the shadow of his heart, the desire to revenge against Husho of Rescue. Laser saw his hesitation and said simply, "We don't have any choice, right? Let's face it together." They adjusted the equipment and prepared for the next step, moving towards the path of gathering resistance. The building outside was moving, like a living entity, waiting for their challenge. Chen Yan took a deep breath and pressed the start button implanted into the device. The device was like a tangible current that radiated his nerves, connecting to the surrounding networks. On the screen of the monitoring room, data torrents stormed like wild rivers, gathering into a secret signal to be sent to the underground channel of the Resistance Alliance. Ella stood aside, her eyes staring at the beating symbols. Her hands trembled slightly, which was the post-mortem left by street medicine, which twisted her vision into a mystery. "The signal is stable," Chen Yan said, his voice calm and calm. "Our allies will receive it, and it's time now." His words were filled with determination that had been developed from past experiences. The manipulated period had made him learn to hide his weaknesses and turn them into a leading weapon. Suddenly, a low siren rose from the depths of the floor, and the company's security system had locked the intrusion signal. The red light swept across the corridor, like an invisible dog sniffing the track. Ella's fantasy was added, and she pointed to a seemingly safe door. "Then, there is a shadow moving, like a twisted machine." Her voice was filled with panic, and she tried hard to suppress it. Chen Yan glanced at her and knew that this was the scar left by her childhood when she was surviving on the street, and it always exploded under high pressure. He pulled her to another passage. "Don't worry about those illusions and follow me." They turned into a long repair tunnel. The walls here were covered with shocking electric networks, and the air was filled with the pungent metal breath, and the new environment allowed them to avoid following them at any time. In the tunnel, Chen Yan started the virtual conversation and projected an underground contact wearing a mask, and the image was blurred and full of urgency. "Chen Yan, you are raising old questions again," the contactor said, his verbal simplicity and directness. "I haven't forgotten what the last experiment turned you into. Those implants not only crack the system, but also chew on your reason. Chen Yan's mouth slightly, showing a habitual rebellious smile. It is because of the dead prison that I know how to bring people out of darkness. Tell the Alliance and gather in Dongi. The conversation reveals how his past experience has polished out the fruitful style, allowing Ella to draw strength from it. She held his arm tightly. I can stand by it, just like you. This exchange brought them closer together, allowing her to calm down her vision at a while. However, when the signal successfully assembled the first Alliance members, the response came quickly. A group of automatic guards descended from the ceiling, and the laser beam shot through the tunnel. Chen Yan and Ella were forced to act separately, and he led the way in the direction of the Alliance, while she followed in the chaos, and the illusion that although blurring the vision and ignoring her inner slut. They successfully joined forces with several allies, hid in a while and prepared for the next wave of action. Outside, the police kept roaring, as undesirable as the city's beating. The tacit understanding between each other deepened in this crisis, and they knew that the road was still long. Chen Yan led the members of the Alliance to move along the dark wind pipeline, and the air was filled with a cold ozone smell. This was the deep skeleton of the Enterprise building, and the flashing light strips on the walls jumped like a living organism. They just covered their bodies off at the moment, and the echo of the alarm was still rumbling around their ears, and now the target is directly aimed at the core control center. The fortress-like room is hidden underground, guarding the city's monitoring server, and every step has to be passed through the layered laser grid. The Alliance teams were dispersed into small groups. When Chen Yan first inserted into the first line of defense, a group of mechanical guards popped out from the ceiling cracks, and their limbs reflected blue light, shooting accurately like a prediction algorithm. The spider and energy beam intersect to form a network. Chen Yan avoids his body and relies on the implanted device to crack nearby sensors immediately. Scatter. Don't let them lock in the pattern, he growled, his verbal silence that was grinding through the streets. These defenses not only respond quickly, but also predict movement, which is the masterpiece of corporate artificial intelligence, which makes every sudden storm turn into a game. Internal communications suddenly stopped, and the interference rolled in like an electromagnetic storm. The headphones of the Alliance members burst into noise, and the coordination instantly fell into chaos. A teammate hit the obscure barrier and developed a crisp metal collision. Chen Yan glanced at Ella Thorning behind her. Her fingers held the weapon tightly, and the vision began to twist her vision again. The signal to die, she murmured, voice carrying the street survivors' silhouette. I see the wall moving. Chen Yan pulled her into a small repair room. The environment here was a blind spot full of circuit boards, and temporarily stopped the pursuit. He stopped gasping and his eyes closed. Her eyes. Remember that experiment? They stuffed my brain into the program, like putting a knife in my memory. His words were straightforward and prickly, revealing the past injustice, making her realize that her puncture was not alone. But we have to stand by, Ella. Your vision may be inconsistent, but you are more realistic than those machines. Ella took a deep breath and responded, I won't drag my back legs, just like you climbed out of that prison. This ignited her will, and they quickly reorganized and continued to move forward. When arriving at the control center, artificial intelligence launches predictive attacks, projecting virtual traps, forcing them to respond. Chen Yan cracked the interface of the main server, and the data tides flowed into his vision. His fingers danced on the virtual keyboard, and finally triggered a snail sequence. The server began to collapse, and the city monitoring network collapsed like domino. While also exposed a hidden file, the company's tragedy was not only about monitoring, but also involved manipulating street support. When they retreated, they were in a state of turmoil and prepared to face the next challenge. Yedu's movement remains the same, but the fire of resistance has been deeply rooted in it. Chen Yan carried the Alliance members and ran along the underground passage, stomping on the metal floor, and the air was filled with a pungent smell of electricity, as if the blood vessels of the city were flowing with rotten energy. They just quit from the control center, and the crash of the server made the surrounding screens flash and also triggered a prayer response from the company's brain. A shaped energy wall suddenly rose, dividing the team into two, and mechanical sentries emerged from the cracks on the sidewall. Their limbs were filled with cold green light, and their actions were as unconscious as precision algorithms. "Fuck, the signal is broken again," Chen Yan roared, with only a silence of noise left in the earphones. He glanced at the teammates scattered in the chaos, and several figures were dragged into the phantom fantasy by virtual traps. Those were virtual skulls projected by core artificial intelligence that distort the reality and make people misunderstand physical disorders. Chen Yan's implantation device was buzzing, and he forced himself to focus. His fingers quickly slide on the virtual interface, trying to reconnect communication. "Don't panic, look for cover." His voice brought the eagerness to survive on the street, and he did not lose the result of leadership. Ella fell into a broken server, and the wall was hanging like a numbness, emitting a faint heat. "This is a temporary shelter filled with scrap chips and humming chillers." She gasped and leaned against the wall, her eyes flashing through a twisted image, which was her vision again. Chen Yan followed, closed the door with a slam, and separated the mechanical sound from the outside. "I thought we were gone," Ella said in a low voice, with a tired voice. "But do you know? I was also their experience back then. They transformed my nerves into monitors, allowing me to see what doesn't exist, like a never-ending nightmare." Chen Yan was stunned. This was the first time he had heard her reveal this intimate pain. His hand stopped on the device, his eyes locked her. "I understand that feeling," he responded, stinging with a straightforward and prickly word. "They stuffed codes in my brain to make the memories a weapon. But we are not their tools, Ella. We have to break this cycle." This not only comforted, but also ignited the flame of salvation inside him, making the connection between the two deeper from pure partners. The creation they shared was transformed into power. Ella clicked and held the weapon tight. "Then let us tear this dead system apart." With the extra attack, the core artificial intelligence has activated the self-destruction program, and a wave of virtual interaction energy penetration sweeps through the channel. Chen Yan rushed out of his hiding place, implanted the device to connect with the server, and his fingers danced on the air's virtual keyboard, cracking the code while avoiding physical attacks. Data torrents flow like a tide, revealing the depth of corporate traits. Not only manipulates the supporters, but also plans to trigger urban collapse to eliminate the power of resistance. The team gradually reorganized after the communication was restored, and Ella covered his side and they broke through the defense line together. The pace of retreat gradually became stable, the noise of the night capital was reverberating far away, and the resistance was still unabated. Chen Yan felt a new sense of determination, and they continued to move forward, stepping towards the next goal. Chen Yan led his team to sink along the hidden elevator and entered the core port of the Enterprise headquarters, the core server area. The air here is as heavy as melting metal, with dynamic quantum screens lying on the walls, projecting complex data flows, constantly reorganizing like living nerves. The team members lowered their bodies, avoiding the monitoring beam of patrols, and stepping on the smooth ceramic floor at every step, making a faint echo. Their goal is clear: to access hidden files and expose the culprit of corporate manipulation of urban collapse. As soon as you enter the server area, the alarm sounds whip the air like a whip. The artificial intelligence protection system has been activated, and the virtual barrier rises from the floor, twisting into a knife-like energy network, trying to block the way. Chen Yan's fingers operated quickly on the implant device to avoid waves of digital attacks. "These dead firewall layers are spread out," he growled, lying in his verbal slander with the slander of the street veterans, just like their sarcasm, never giving anyone a breath. The members of the team were scattered and covered with laser guns, but the communication channel was suddenly interfered, and a harsh mess kept the commands going. Chen Yan glanced at Ella on the side, and she was using a knife-like action to remove a sensor. Taking advantage of the time to get out of the air, they hid in a secondary control room, filled with flashing data cores, emitting warm radiant light. This was a temporary breathing point. Ella gasped against her wall, her eyes flashing through a blurry illusion. "They not only changed my nerves," she said, her voice as cold as broken ice. "I also tried to erase my memory of my family. Every time I recalled it, it was as blurred as being reprinted by a program, but it made me more clear that we had to end it all." Chen Yan pointed his head, a slight flickering in his eyes. The codes in my brain once made me forget the past, but now they have become my weapons. Don't let those bastards win. However, the chaos is added. A team member's actions were suspicious, resulting in more serious communication interference and virtual attacks flooded like a tide. Chen Yan suspected that he was a traitor and quickly cut off the suspicious link. Who is making a fool? Stay alert, he shouted, his fingers quickly cracking the code on the virtual interface. With tight time, the server starts to self-sell the program, and the file collapses like a waterfall. He stressed his inner anxiety, focused on the key encryption layer, and finally opened a gap, and data fragments revealed the company's comprehensive plan, not only manipulate the support group, but also plan to cause massive collapse and eliminate all resistance. The team was reassembled, the file copy was completed, and they quietly evacuated the server area. The noise of the night capital came from the upper level, and Chen Yan felt that the crisis was approaching the extreme, but it also brought about a forward momentum. They continued to move outwards and prepare for the next challenge. When Chen Yan led his team out of the server area, a low vibration came from the underground, like the heart of the city began to twitch. The copying of the file was already in his hands, but the moment they stepped into the corridor, the self-destruction mechanism was started and ruthlessly, the quantum bracket disintegrated like a melted skeleton, the outer wall of the high-rise building fell, and debris smashed into the street like rain. The noise of the night capital instantly turned into a chaotic torrent, and the out-of-control artificial intelligence machinery bees out of the hidden tunnel, the mechanical arms danced with the electric light, and intercourse with the violent crowd into a crazy whirlpool. The team advanced through the narrow escape passage, and Chen Yan's implanted device flashed the alarm to remind him that the air tracker was locking their positions. "Don't let them bite us," Chen Yan shouted, his breath shaking the thick edge of the street. He glanced at an unmanned detector descending from the sky, and the searchlight swept across the ground like a sharp sword. The ground-blocking network was also tightened, and the company's security team set up roadblocks on the broken streets, and the laser siege columns were uncertain. The secondary troubles emerged. The team's communications made a harsh creaking sound due to strong electromagnetic interference, and the commands continued, allowing the evacuation progress to slow down. A team member tried to reset the device and was hit by an out-of-control automatic car, forcing everyone to spread out. Ella grabbed Chen Yan's arm and dragged him toward a waste warehouse. This was once the storage point for the Enterprise. Now only the rotten metal shells and piles of waste chips are left, and the air is filled with the smell of Chen Fu's circuit. She gasped and leaned against the wall, her eyes flashing with a tired and resolute heart. "Those bastards not only stole my memory, but also turned my past into pieces," she said, sounding like a sharp knife, without much affection. "Every time I flash, I see not my family, but the illusion they implanted. In order to survive, I learned to use this knife to hit it." Chen Yan pointed his head, clenched his fists tightly, and recalled his own experimental shadow in his brain, which made him more sure. "We're all carrying those code curses," he responded, with sparks of rebellion in the verbal tuning, "but this time, we're going to let them take the business a bite. Don't stop, Ella, we have to take everyone out." The warehouse's door slammed shut and gave them a moment of breathing. They quickly checked the team, repaired the communicator, and regrouped. The outside roared away, and the team moved along the underground tunnel system and moved towards the city side, stepping on the slippery pipes at each step, feeling a greater threat approaching from the horizon. Chen Yan was headed and his pace was steady. Ella followed the side. The tacit understanding between the two people turned into soundless driving force, allowing the entire team to maintain order in the chaos. The faint light in the tunnel guides them to continue. The air deep in the tunnel became more and more solemn, and sporadic quantum nodes were flashing on the damp pipe wall, like tired firecrackers slamming in the dark. Chen Yan led his team along the narrow passage, stepping on the slippery metal lattice every step, and a low-frequency buzzing bird was transmitted under his feet, which was the frontier of the city, the last line of defense for enterprises. The quantum monitoring network is like an invisible giant network, hidden behind the arch of the tunnel, ready to swallow any invaders at any time. Chen Yan's implant device began to jump abnormally, and the flow of data surged into his vision like a tide, forcing him to stop and take a deep breath of air that smelled metal. "This is their fortress," Chen Yan said in a low voice, which was filled with the street fighter's insults. "Quantum network is not a simple firewall. It will read your thoughts and turn your fear into an attack." He glanced at the team, with fatigue marks engraved on the faces of the members, and the remaining stuttering of the communication system made the command stand out and break, and a harsh noise made everyone stare at each other, and the seeds of suspicion took root in the team. A secondary crisis emerges. A team member accused another person of misguided routes, causing a small-scale conflict, and the atmosphere is like a tight wire and may explode at any time. Ella grabbed Chen Yan's arm and brought him into the shadow of a fork. The walls here were filled with blurry circuit patterns, like forgotten memory fragments. She leaned against the cold metal and her eyes flashed through a hidden pain. "Those implanted memories," she said, sounding like a sharp current, without reversing. "I have seen my family, but it's all fake. Businesses use them to sway my past. Like me, aren't you? The ghost of the laboratory is still spinning in your brain." Chen Yan was stunned, his brain flashing through his imprisoned years. The flame of revenge and his desire to save him made him clench his fists. "We all carry those fake codes," he responded, his lingering words like steel. "But this time, I won't let it dominate us. From now on, we are partners, not dependencies." Taking advantage of this period of breathing, Chen Yan quickly adjusted the rectification. He turned off the interference source of the communication device and turned to the team with his manual instructions to resolve the rift of trust. The quantum monitoring network began to counterattack, and a wave of mental attacks stabbed him like a hidden sharp blade, forcing him to face the shadow in his heart. Should he give it a try for revenge, or find a new way to save the enemy? In the slam, he made up his mind to transform the energy of the team into a unified movement. "Come on me," he shouted, with rebellious enthusiasm. "We are going to break this dead network and welcome the dawn of the night capital." The team regrouped and moved along the arch, quantum light dancing around them, indicating that a greater challenge was coming. After the team stepped into the arch, what came towards us was a glittering quantum vortex. The core castle was like a huge optical giant, roaring with a low sound. Chen Yan was first to penetrate, and an invisible attack burst out from the sea of brains. The Enterprise's artificial intelligence guardian launched a mental invasion, twisting his memories into weapons. The illusion came like a tide, forcing him to regain the shackles in the laboratory. The period of the year that was implanted in the creation of emotions made him lose his mind for a while. But he clenched his teeth and used cracking skills to cut off some links, turning to the scattered teams. The actual defense is about to start, and the laser barrier rises from the floor and blocks the retreat. In the midst of the war, the secondary obstacle broke out. The implanted device of the team members began to lose control, and a stinging arc interference burst out, forcing a person to fall to the ground, and the system misjudged the enemy. Chen Yan glanced at Ella's companion who was protecting his companion, and he shouted, "Don't let those programs dominate you. We are not their puppets." His voice was as sharp as a blade, and the cruelty of Su-Han's survival in the street. As Ella responded, her language was filled with a cold decision. "I remember that time, they took away my freedom and changed into a bunch of fake family images. What about you? Those experiments are not the end, but the fuel for our rebirth." During the battle, the two men hid into a hidden projection cavity. The walls there projected a holographic picture of the history of Yedu, like a living urban tide. She held his arm, her eyes flashing with the slashed marks of the past. "We should have been destroyed," Ella said, his low words as stable as current, "but you teach me that revenge is not the end, but the rescue is the only thing." Chen Yan pointed his head, and his inner shadow gradually dissipated. He recalled his helplessness in his youth and felt a new force. "Yes, we are the fire of change," he said, speaking like steel, not the victim anymore. After reassembly, Chen Yan launched the last hit and injected the virus program to attack the quantum core. The Guardian collapsed, and the energy waves scattered like broken glasses, revealing the corporate slander files, manipulating the public's thinking experience, hidden resources, and everything is naked. The screen of Yedu began to flash, the truth spread like a torrent, the citizens woke up, and the wave of protests began. With the fall of the fortress, Chen Yan stood among the dead body, looking at the rising light of dawn. Night is no longer a prison for corruption, but a stage for rebirth. He stood shoulder to shoulder with Ella, becoming the guardian of this city, and everything was in a peaceful state.